used to actually be terrified in any water where I couldn't see the bottom. Tales of monsters lurking in the deep. What are these enigmatic, crazy creatures? The first recognizable ancestors of sharks existed before trees, whereas now they could be facing collapse in a single generation. I actually think it's very hard to know just how much you love something until you lose it. Grief is the price we pay for love. The thing that drove me on this path was a pure passion for the animals themselves. I didn't start out wanting to save them because I didn't know that they needed saving or help. This one's for the ocean. I realized that if we want to help save sharks, we need to make sure they have safe places to live in.
Sharks and rays, they are ancient, enigmatic, misunderstood, and essential to our oceans. But these important animals are under immense pressure. As the Save Our Seas Foundation, we're here to help. Through supporting research, conservation, and education, we work to ensure a future for sharks and rays. The Save Our Seas Foundation. Together, we can make a difference.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Save Our Seas Foundation Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Lance. I am the Director of Environmental Sustainability here at the Museum of Discovery and Science in sunny South Florida. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you. We have not one, but two speakers tonight to help us celebrate International Sawfish Day. If you didn't know it was International Sawfish Day, well, welcome to our celebration. We have a little bit of party music happening in the background. We're happy to celebrate with two sawfish researchers from the Save Our Seas Foundation. I'm going to be talking to us tonight about their research and all the amazing work that they're doing. Just a little bit about the museum. We here at the museum are always trying to connect people to inspiring science. That's kind of our mission here at the museum. And so we do that in a lot of different ways. Through environmental sustainability initiatives is one of the primary ways. If you ever find yourself in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, please stop by our museum. We have a lot of wonderful exhibits that you can come and explore and learn about sharks and rays and all kinds of things in between. Like I said, tonight we're joined by two speakers, Dr. Patricia Charvet and Dr. Tristan Guttridge, both studying sawfish and lots of other sharks and rays. But tonight, like I said, they're going to be talking mostly about them. Dr. Patricia Charvet is a biologist with a deep-rooted passion, fascinated by ocean and its creatures. Since childhood, she pursued a bachelor's degree in biology, and then went on to pursue a master's degree in zoology, and eventually a PhD in biological sciences, with a focus on zoology from the Federal University of Paraíba in Brazil. Dr. Charvet has extensive experience in the field of zoology, specializing in ichthyology, it's a study of fish. Her research focuses on the biology and conservation of species, with a special emphasis on elasmobranchs, sharks and rays. Her journey into studying sharks and rays began during her master's studies, where she was encouraged to focus on freshwater stingrays. During her PhD work, she collected valuable data on stingrays, but also worked to document sawfish landings in northern Brazil. Currently, Patricia is serving as a visiting researcher at the graduate program on systematics, use, and conservation of biology at the Federal University of Sierra, and is the Save Our Seas Foundation Conservation Fellow. Welcome, Patricia. We're so happy to have you tonight.
Thank you, Lance. Great to be here. Thank you very much, and happy Sawfish Day.
Yeah, happy Sawfish Day. We're also joined tonight by Dr. Tristan Guttridge. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Zoology and a PhD in Behavioral Ecology from the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. He has a passion for asking questions about animal behavior and has spent over a decade learning about behavioral complexities of sharks. On completion of his doctoral research, Tristan was awarded a prestigious Endeavour Fellowship through the Australian government and conducted a series of innovative experiments exploring sharks' cognition, how they think and how they perceive things, hosted through the Macquarie University in Australia. Tristan held a role as director at the BBFSF in the Bahamas for many years, which saw him establish long-term research initiatives and investigations in the migratory patterns and personality of sharks and rays. Tristan has over 70 peer-reviewed publications, has appeared and hosted many TV shows for the Discovery Channel, Shark Week, you can find him there, and on the BBC, and was awarded as a National Geographic Explorer. Over the last few years, Tristan has established a research program in Andros, Bahamas, and Jupiter, Florida, called Saving the Blue. Tristan, welcome. We're so happy to have you as well.
Happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Good evening and happy Sawfish Day.
Happy Sawfish Day. We need a little sawfish emojis to put on the screen.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get started here pretty soon because, like I said, we have two presenters tonight to hear from. So we're going to dive into their presentations and learn all about their amazing research. While Tristan gets his slides kind of pulled up here, I'm just going to remind everyone that you're encouraged to ask questions as we go along. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but please feel free to type any questions you have for our researchers tonight in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and we can get to those questions as we go through. Don't be shy, ask lots of questions, all right? All right, Tristan, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right,
everyone
go
else is
for
ready
it.
too. Brilliant.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. Delighted to be here. Excited to talk about sawfish, and of course, the fact that it's International Sawfish Day is even better time to learn about sawfish. So thank you for the introduction, Lance, the kind words, appreciate that. That's a pretty decent background of where I've come and what I do. So a little bit more about Saving the Blue. My wife and I established it in 2018. We became a 501c3 in 2019, and we work mainly with threatened sharks and rays, and obviously sawfish are critically endangered, or smalltooth sawfish critically endangered globally, and they're one of the species that we work with. But part of our mission statements is also to provide experiential opportunities for students, particularly minority groups, and we also work a lot in education and outreach as well. Saving the Blue has kind of provided the vehicle for this project that I'll be talking about over the next kind of 10-12 minutes. So when we think about sawfish, sometimes people get a little bit confused. So I always like to start with this slide. So when I say sawfish, I mean the animal on the top left of your screen with the big rostrum and those teeth on the outside that is in actual fact a ray, and not the animal on the right-hand side, which is a saw shark that has kind of more of a triangular shaped rostrum, or the sword fish on the bottom that is actually a bony fish. So what I mean is a sawfish that is a species of ray. And there are 5 different species of sawfish globally. The one that I'll be talking about today will be the smalltooth sawfish. And of course, that rostrum is the most distinctive feature of the sawfishes. And it's almost probably around 20% the length of their body. And some of these animals can get up to 20 feet in size as well. And that that rostrum actually has electrical sensors all the way down it, as well as its lateral line. So it uses it in swiping and pinning fish and prey. So sawfish in the Bahamas will sit in these creeks and will swat the fish with their sawfish bill as they swim past them. And they've also been found to use it in potential agonistic or aggressive displays between males. This was a picture of a male sawfish that had these scarrings all down its side that potentially had been used in fighting to gain access to a female. And as I mentioned, there are 5 different species of sawfish across the globe. And unfortunately, all 5 of those species are actually endangered, critically endangered now, and are in a lot of trouble, unfortunately. And this is in part due to really habitat removal. A lot of these sawfish rely on coastal habitats in their early life history. So when they're pups, they hang out in the mangroves and close to shore. And of course, humans have developed a lot of that shoreline construction, etc., hotels. And so that's reduced the availability of habitat for these animals. And then overfishing as well. These sawfish, they get their bills caught in gill nets. And the sawfish, the rostrums themselves have been traded a lot in the curio trade, and the fins as well. Because of them being such an iconic and crazy looking bizarre animal, they seem to be worth a lot of money. Now in 2014, there was a big kind of assessment of many of the species of sharks and rays across the globe. And as a result of their high exposure to coastal shallow water fisheries and their large body size, it was actually the sawfish family that was the most threatened of all sharks and rays across the globe. And the smalltooth sawfish is one of those species. So this animal can get up to 18 feet long. As I said, its rostrum, its bill, is almost a quarter of the size of its whole body. They can get absolutely huge. They reach maturity around 10 to 12 years of age, and they have around 8 to 12 pups every couple of years. So kind of similar conservative life history traits to other sharks and rays. And this map on the top right shows their distribution. And the yellow and the red are unfortunately areas in their former range where they are now possibly extinct and very unlikely to be found, whereas the green is where we know for them to be still. And there's a range contraction of around 80%. Now here in Florida and in the US, they have been protected on the endangered species list since 2003. And indeed, they were the first native marine fish to be listed. In the early 90s, the US also recognized the fact that these sawfish were in trouble and banned gill netting in the Florida state waters, which has served to help them too. And then there was a task force that was brought together in the early 2000s, a team of scientists from the US that ended up generating, they had funding and were able to generate a lot more information about the biology and behavior of these animals. And their remit was essentially to try and recover and conserve these sawfish. And of course, there are other international actions as well for sawfishes too, such as being listed on CITES Appendix 2 that banned all trade, and the Convention of the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals too. And then in 2017, there was a big meeting of international scientists, sawfish experts, that assessed the progress and priorities. And the Bahamas, during that meeting, was identified for the smalltooth sawfish as a priority region for moving forward. So I'll now start talking a little bit about sawfish in the Bahamas and more specifically about our projects there. So in 2015, myself alongside other colleagues collated all encounters and sightings of sawfish that had happened the previous 10 years to try and learn about these animals' distribution in the Bahamas. And as you can see here, we've got this big island in the middle that's called Andros, and that had over 60% of the sightings and encounters. And indeed, a few animals had been satellite tracked as well. And then Bimini, the smaller island, to the west of Andros, also had sightings as well. And this was one of the captures of a sawfish that we were able to catch in the middle of the night in a gill net. You can imagine my surprise as I walked up to my net thinking I'd find a baby lemon shark, and I have this massive sawfish instead in the net. And then work in Andros, a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Dean Grubbs, established a program where he was running expeditions to Andros and working in this northwestern region, and was able to tag a number of sawfish here with satellite transmitters, and then build these essentially these hotspot maps of where the animals were using. So you can see this area in the northwest is particularly important for the sawfish in Andros. And at the same time, Dean and various other colleagues were working in Florida, and across the last 15 years have actually ended up acoustic tagging almost 100 now, I believe, 10-year acoustic tags that have been, these animals have been detected all up the east and west coast of Florida, as far north of South Carolina as well. And then some animals were also tagged in the Bahamas too, in Andros. But unfortunately, there's no apparent exchange of these animals. It seems to be that there's a separate, potentially a separate population going on, and that the Floridian sawfish or the American sawfish is separate from the Bahamian. And interestingly, Dean, on one of his longline adventures, ended up catching a big female that was pregnant that started to pup, and she had near-term full length little pup sawfish, and they were able to sample them and release them into the wild. And this suggested that all the different life stages of sawfish were actually in Andros. And so there was an opportunity to support the recovery of the species to the wider Caribbean. And of course, in the Bahamas, commercial longlining and commercial gill netting has been banned in the early 90s, which have, of course, likely helped protect these sawfish. And in Andros, they have a 1.5 million acre national park. That purple strip on the west side of the island is actually a national park where they are protected. But despite this protection in the MPA, there's actually no national protection for the species in the Bahamas, because they are a ray and they're not a shark. So there's an urgent need to really understand more about their distribution, particularly in Andros. We know from this early work, the yellow area is important, but what about the rest of the island? You know, we're talking an island that is 100 miles in length by 40 miles in width. And we know nothing about these animals in the rest of the island and how important other habitats might be. And to be able to delineate and find these critical habitats for maybe a nursery habitat for the babies, or a mating area or aggregation site for some of these adults along the drop-off. We know in Florida that they like this deep reef habitat as they reach adulthood. And perhaps these sawfish are using this deep reef off the east side, but we don't know anything about it. And at the same time, there was no community engagement. You know, it's a huge amount of effort to go to Andros and try and even catch a sawfish. I think Dean caught maybe 7 or 8 sawfish across a 10-year period, and so had a huge amount of effort in the field. But what about engaging with the community as well? Andros is a heavily subsistence lifestyle island. Around 80% of income is from essentially water, going on the water, fishing, sponging, and then of course guiding as well. A lot of people go out to Andros to go fishing for bonefish. It's a game fish, and then to release. And they earn there's around 35 million years is brought into the Bahamas just through guiding in the Bahamas. So there's a lot in Andros. So there's a lot of people on the water that could be sighting these sawfish. And then, of course, one of our remits is to try and inspire the young people and children and students in Andros too, because if we do get national protection for the species, then we need to make sure that these regulations are followed and that we have people on the ground that are excited about protecting these animals. And so our kind of major objectives over the last 6 or 7 years have been to identify essential sawfish habitat, try and build out an almost like a self-sustaining reporting network. So water users in Andros can provide information about where these sawfish are, and then lead community workshops and essentially empower Androsians to become almost citizen scientists, and then provide training and supervision for marine science students so that Bahamians are able to actually work and research their own animals that are using the waters that are in the habitats around surrounding their island. And of course, we wanted the ultimate goal for national protection for the species and a sustainable recovered population. So where are we at the moment? How is our progress going? So we initially started by doing around interviews along all the different settlements on the east side of the island. We actually were able to record another 100 sawfish sightings and build out these distribution maps. And as you can see, yes, some sawfish were sighted in that West Side National Park, but we also had sightings along the east side where there are cuts in the island. There seem to be quite a few sightings, and we got sightings of babies as well, which was really exciting and confirmed what Dean had thought too. And during May and August seemed to be a key time to be observing these sawfish. Most likely they're more mobile during those warmer months of the year. But one of the things that was disturbing and worrying to us that we had evidence of harvesting. There's a subsistence settlement on the northwest corner that had actually been targeting sawfish. Not many, only a handful a year. But given the population size that we think is small, this could have a detrimental effect. And they weren't just using it for subsistence, but also to trade with as well. So there was a major concern about this, this finding too. And then part of the last couple of years, we've started running these kind of dedicated 10-day expeditions, this focal sampling. And we've used these two different methods, an aerial drone to find sawfish via surveys above the water and then under the water with these baited remote underwater video cameras that are called BRUVs. And we identified these 4 kind of sampling regions based on the sightings data that we had before. And part of these trips, we hosted University of the Bahamas marine science students so they could learn about different methods and techniques and be able to hopefully lead some of these trips as well. And I've got a photo of me and a student there who came on one of our trips that I'd actually met 6 years prior when giving a talk on behalf of Save Our Seas in Grand Bahama. And fast forward 6 years, he came on one of our trips. So I thought that was pretty cool to show. And then part of these surveys now, we've done 450 transects, and these are 500 meters in length each. And we've only seen 2 sawfish. You can see one in the bottom left-hand corner. And then this little video here, can you spot the sawfish? I found it almost impossible to spot, but you can see a shape directly in the middle. And when you change the contrasts, you can actually make out a sawfish that is really well buried. So just goes to show that you need multiple methods to be able to try and figure out where these animals are, because they can be really well hidden and camouflaged in that sediment. So the baited remote cameras, we did around 200 of these so far, and only 1 sawfish has been sighted. So again, this is really showing the fact that these are a rare animal. And part of our program is to really start to connect with within the community and talk with the water guides, the bonefish guides, and we've started to get sightings. And we have developed this WhatsApp group. They were like, that's the best way you're going to get any sightings from us, is by having these WhatsApp groups. And here are 2 of the sightings that we got of these sawfish in the last 6 months. And the yellow dots are where we got even further sawfish sightings across the last couple of years. So this is really helping to understand where these animals are and empowering these guys to provide data on animals that they're seeing out in the open and on their trips. Part of our work is also to educate and to provide outreach opportunities. And one of the things that my wife has done over the last few years is developed and created this children's book to try and inspire the younger generation. So which faces belong in these places? And it focuses on habitats, conservation concerns, and different species. And she has actually gifted over 4,000, I think it's 4,500 books now across all of Andros and a couple of the other islands in the Bahamas, trying to inspire the younger generation. You can see in the top right, my children actually were part of that as well on a recent trip to Long Island. Because without the younger generation being inspired and excited by these animals and wanting to protect the habitats and the animals that live in them, then perhaps this legislation won't continue for the foreseeable future. We've also done various other local school visits as well, gifting out drawing sheets and other to kind of promote the use of the non-use of single-use plastics, so like recyclable water bottles, things like that as well. So in summary, just to try and pull everything together, we've got no movement of sawfish between the Bahamas and the US. We've got no protection for sawfish outside of Andros as well. We've got evidence of a small population, genetics data showing that, the drone data, the captures that Dean is getting to, and we've got harvest of a number of animals each year. So we really need urgent work and urgent national protection for this species. And that's something that we've been working on. We've had virtual meetings with local stakeholders, and we have, this has been, recommendation was put forward by the Department of Marine Resources in January 2023. And we're getting close to it. And colleagues, Dr. Sonia Fordham and Dean Grubbs also hosted meetings with the environmental ministers recently. And we're soon hopefully going to get protection for sawfish. And as I mentioned, it's so important that we develop a real common excitement about protecting sawfish. And recently we hosted a number of different events in Andros, a dinner event and children's event, to try and inspire the community to really take on board sawfish and try and nationally protect them. Hopefully I haven't gone too over time, but really appreciate everyone tuning in and listening to my talk, and a lot of acknowledgements to thank people over the years, including many stakeholders from the Bahamas, as well as the Andros Island Bonefish Club that have helped us develop this project out. And of course, the Save Our Seas Foundation for major funding for this project, and various other people. So I'll look forward to taking questions at the end of this session, and hopefully I haven't gone over too long.
No, you're good.
Talk about the project as well, but really, looking forward to questions at the end.
Thank you. It sounds like you're doing some really amazing work, very holistic work. Right? You can see multiple levels of the research happening, and that community engagement piece, I really commend you for that, because that seems like it's often in the past with research, that was often the missing component, right? So, so that's really cool. We'll have to have you back and see how that component is going, and how you can, how many WhatsApp messages you get.
Yeah, well, that's and that truly was my wife's doing, and that's the difference between having two people that are running a nonprofit. One is a scientist, and one has life experience and experience in business and marketing and education, and her saying, well, okay, it's great getting this data, but you need to connect with everyone in the community so that everyone knows what's going on. And you might also find that they know more about these animals than you do. And that's
right. They're out there. They're out there every day. Yeah. And it just enhances, the citizen science approach just enhances the time that you can spend out there gathering research. Right. So,
yeah, I mean, these guys are on the water 300+ days a year. So absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. We did have one question. I'm going to save it for the end. And get Patricia's overview of her presentation. So the person that asked the question, don't worry, we'll get to you. We haven't forgotten. Patricia, you want to go ahead and share your screen and tell us all about what you're doing with a different species of sawfish, but very similar with conservation initiatives and research focus and everything else. So please go ahead, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again for having me here. I'll be talking about different species, but we ended up finding the second species there too. But anyway, let's talk it over. So the project we're working on is called Turning the Tide for Sawfish in the Amazonian coast. So I'll be talking about the species and about the region we're working. So like Tristan mentioned, we have 5 species. In the region we're working, there are 2 species which are critically endangered like all the others. And that's mainly the large-toothed sawfish. That's the one we're working with. But after we went sampling, we figure out we do get not many hits, but very few hits of the small-toothed sawfish too. So usually the large-tooth, they tend to be a bit more yellowish than the small-tooth, which tend to be a bit more grayish. You can see here in the images. Unfortunately, I had to use some images, not from the region of study for the Smalltooth, because you'll understand why. All the images I have for the large tooth are from transparent waters, which are aquariums, so you can't really find them in the wild because of the murky waters. But okay, so usually, like Tristan already said very well, illustrated very well with that gorgeous water. This were pictures taken from the plane approaching Florida. So you have very transparent water. You can work with drones and all that. Well, the pictures on the right there are the ones, the kind of environment I'm used to working. So it's extremely murky water, extremely dynamic area, big river discharges, and it could be either muddy or sandy substrates, bottoms. So, okay, so where is the Amazonian coast? We're looking at South America. So if you keep going south there, on the northernmost area of South America, we have the Amazon River and other very large rivers, very powerful rivers, where they discharge a lot of water into the Atlantic to the point of pushing out the river water all the way up to 200 kilometers out into the Atlantic. And during the dry season, you just have the mass of water flowing a bit slower, but still a lot. And then the Atlantic Ocean approaches the coast a bit more. You can see on the waterfall graph there's a lot of intersection between freshwater or brackish water and marine water. So we have layers of water covering that region. And this region too was considered a beacon of hope for the large-tooth sawfish. So you would see there on the right, you have all the little rivers and the main areas of study where we're visiting to look for the large-tooth sawfish in the Amazonian coast. So what is the Amazonian coast like? We have extensive mangrove lining. It's the largest contiguous area of mangroves in the world. They're located over there. We do have many countries, like, for example, Guyana and Suriname, below sea level. So they have a complete unique technology of dikes to keep the water away from the ocean. We have gigantic tidal differences, and we have a mix of mangrove, not so much the rocky environment, but we do have some rocky environments there, like the top right-hand corner, and lots of beaches. It's not the kind of beach you'd have palm trees, coconut trees, but we do have other species like the acai. They grow on the flooded areas near the mouth of the Amazon there. So what are the threats for sawfish in that region? We have a very big fishing fleet operating there. The main catch are different species of catfish. They operate a lot with gill nets, so that's a big threat for sawfish because of the saw they have, the rostra. They can get easily entangled in almost any kind of net. We have landings of sharks over there. And we have even smaller artisanal scale fisheries going on with smaller nets, but they do come up from the shore, and that's another point of entanglement. And on the bottom right there, you have ghost fishing. So occasionally, fishing equipment gets lost or just inappropriately discarded, and it ends up going to the beach and would fish along its way while it's completely removed from the ocean. And while it's still operating, it would just take fish and kill them, including sawfish. So what is it like working with sawfishes in the Amazonian coast? The boats are completely different. We're talking about over 15 hours of boat to go to one point to the other. Sometimes there are big boats like the one you see in the images. Most of them, it's not a flight, so it's an overnight boat. We get to sleep on hammocks and with lots of neighbors, no rooms. And even if the boat has room, we opt to go stand out in the deck because it's safer just in case something happens. Sometimes we have tiny boats. That's not a motorboat. It's kind of a different boat we use for very shallow areas. Remember, we have mud flats and sandbanks and mud banks all around the region, which are probably the hideaway for sawfish over there. Sometimes the hotel is that little tiny house you can see at the bottom there. So it's quite challenging to be working there. And cars, they're always four-wheel drive, especially in the rainy season, to the point that some of the roads are completely impossible to get through.
Is that a boat with hammocks on it? Is that where you sleep in a hammock?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Yeah,
Those are cool.
Yeah, it's something different. Sometimes they have like private rooms, but if there's any kind of accidents, those could become a trap. So most everybody just sleeps side by side, and on the deck, it's a covered deck, and those are the hammocks where we travel in. And sometimes it's like 15 hours, so definitely you gotta get some food.
See, I don't know. Somehow that seems kind of peaceful. I'm not sure if that's, I've never experienced it, so it's probably not. But anyway, go ahead.
It is peaceful, Lens. It is quite peaceful. I mean, it's very quiet. Usually, people are not too rowdy because they know they have neighbors or kids or babies traveling, women, elder, all together. The only issue could be equipment. We carry equipment, cameras, probes, and things like that. So eventually, we have to watch the equipment whenever the boat, there is a people go in and out the boat, so you just have to watch your bags a bit. But we never had any problems so far, which is good. Yeah, but those are beds. Those are our temporary beds while we travel. It's not an airplane seat. Yeah, and the hotel can be quite challenging, like that tiny little house you have there on the march there. We spend the night there, 2 nights, 3 nights, depending on the work we're doing. So it could be quite challenging. So going on, what do we do over there? We're getting historical data on past presence of sawfish and current presence of sawfish. So we talk to people, and that varies from fishers, community, villages, government people, environment enforcement agents, stakeholders, fisheries unions, and all that. So sometimes it's really hard to figure out the dress code because in the morning we could be sampling in the middle of a mud bank, and then suddenly we get called for a meeting with the law enforcement people and government people. So a dress code can be quite a challenge. But anyway, we can talk to fishermen like you can see on the top left corner there. Sometimes we have to visit like nightclubs where supposedly there was a saw, an old saw, but it ended up only be whale ribs and bones and part of a jaw of a shark. We visit museums. Government people, eventually you come across a buffalo in that area, so it's like some of them can be petted, which is kind of cute. And we take measurements from water. We take probes, we take samples. We do it in the field. We're working with the eDNA, that's environmental DNA. So we're trying to check if the water contains any little bit of piece of DNA of a sawfish, whichever species that might be. And all the sampling sites can be quite challenging. You have to be very careful not to get contamination DNA. So we're looking at the water, see if we find any little tiny fragments of the sawfish that were swimming there in the recent, the very like 24 hours. Sooner the better, and the fresher the better is the sample. So if we're trying to get lucky to see if we can sense one of those, we look for the little like tiny bits of skin that come off, mucus from the mouth, poop and pee. We can pick up that with eDNA. So some of the places can be quite challenging, and it's a very dynamic kind of work. Unfortunately, in the region, we still have incidental captures. So this footage, both footage were in the past 5 years. And due to the roster, there was the saw that was already mentioned. Sometimes sawfish get entangled, and depending on how they're handled, they would feel constrained and it would just keep rolling and getting more and more entangled. A small sawfish were getting positive response from the community in terms of releasing them. We have many reports of fishers saying, yep, we caught one, we released, it was a baby, let it grow. But now when we have larger ones, like the two print screens got from the footage there, that could be an issue because they trash a lot. They try to get set free, and they're called beasts even because they can be wriggling around in a way it could be dangerous to people. So now the big challenge is having fishers releasing the large ones, which they said they would if they had some kind of way of stunning those animals, like an anesthetic or something. So we're trying to figure that out. But once they're caught and they're large and the fisher, they don't know how to handle them, or they're just too entangled to be released to the point that they're not willing to risk getting injured, they end up getting killed. So once killed, we have their rostra, the saw taken off with the teeth. That's the top there. You see the rostrum, the beak there. Meat gets traded eventually when they're caught. And also we did have some seizing of fins too, which are considered extremely valuable in the market, in the fin market. Now, sawfish are completely protected in Brazil. The problem is that when there are incidental captures, that takes a different perspective there, and it's an issue. It's important to mention that they have very important cultural and indigenous importance within the people that live there in the Amazon coast. So usually they are associated to respect and protection. They say that when the immigrants, the indigenous immigrants, reached that area, there was a sawfish that accompanied them and showed them the place they should settle. So it's a very, they have a very big respect for sawfish, to the point that our logo became, it was taken from a drawing, the one you have in the center there, and it's a caripoon art. And there's a fish that's a legend called Paratá, which would be the guardian sawfish in the region. And that's common in more than one indigenous group. We have other reports of, within that region, we have a patchwork of different indigenous groups, and all of them have some kind, all the ones near the water have some kind of relation or respect for sawfish, for the powerful sawfish. And we also have traditional misuse of sawfish parts in the Amazonian coast. So saws, the rostra, were considered good luck charms for many years. We have a booklet trying to change that. It's going to be used with kids. And they just have it hanging on the wall because as a good luck charm. But it's a critically endangered species, so it doesn't make much sense there. They also use it in traditional medicine, which is completely a placebo effect. That means it has no medical substance in them. It's just skin, cartilage, denticles, and the teeth. But people believe it could bring cure to some kind of especially respiratory diseases. And we have a not very nice use, that is the teeth from the rostral teeth. They get plucked off eventually from boiling or just broken off the rostra there, and they're very valued in cockfighting, which in Brazil it's completely illegal. It involves animal welfare issues with the critically endangered species part, but in many of the neighboring countries there's still a demand, so they just tie it. They kind of put the saw teeth into support and tie it to the rooster that would be fighting the other. So it's kind of, we have illegal cockfighting in Brazil, but it's banned. If you're caught, you're getting in trouble. But many of the neighboring countries, it's considered a symbol of status, kind of in line with what the shark fin soup is like. So if you own a cockfighting ring, you're fancy, or if you drink shark fin soup, you're fancy. So we have that issue there too. But the message here is that we believe there's still hope, but for that we must recover the sense of pride or belonging of the regional communities. Is their biodiversity, is our biodiversity too, but they are the ones that are working with the animals on a daily basis. They're the ones that will pull the net and have a sawfish there, and they would be the ones responsible for trying to release it or having to make a decision on killing it or something like that, which we hope would be a turning a point there. The more we increase awareness, the more they understand. Unbelievably, many are not aware of that array, and many are completely unaware that it's critically endangered. It's the last stronghold for the large fish in the entire Atlantic. And why is it still there? Probably they're just hiding in the mud and sand tops there. I mentioned the banks we have up there. So we have to talk to them. We have level language with the communities we talk to. We cannot go into scientific jargon, so we have to teach them a lot, especially kids. So we're involving the youth there. And also speak to the heart. We have to involve passion in what we're doing, because if we don't believe what we're doing, it won't work. So that's what we've been doing in the region. The results are still preliminary. And with that, I just want to close thanking you all for your attention. And thanks especially to Save Our Seas. We're also supported by the Shark Conservation Fund. And we have a bit of support in terms of letting us travel from the university and getting the days to be able to attend conferences and all that. So it's a great team. It's a big team we're working with. And finally, celebrate International Sawfish Day, October 17 today. So I usually work with different languages, from English to Portuguese and Spanish in the middle there. So it's the day we should cherish the species and remember how much they're in trouble, and that our attitudes can make a difference. So thank you.
Wow, thank you. That sounds like you have another rather important project that you're doing down there in the Amazonian coast, and it looks like you have quite a lot of challenges in observing these species, right? So because you can't see them directly, you're relying on that environmental DNA data. And just so our audience knows, so you sample the water and you look for the leftover bits, like you were saying, right? In the water column. So just a quick question on that is how long can you detect if an animal was present? If you find that a sawfish DNA in the water, how do you have any idea of how long ago, or can you even tell that?
Okay, that's a tricky question because it varies a bit on the amount of insulation in terms of UV exposure, the material the DNA is exposed to, water
Okay, so sunlight.
temperature, currents. It's not much. Ideally, it would be 24 hours. Some
Oh,
research
okay. Well,
go by 5 days. It has to be recent. But
yeah.
we do occasionally get to see them, Lance, on the mud flats. So sometimes we would see a dorsal as we approach
Right.
off. Obviously, it would be gone. But we're counting a lot on reports from the fishers, and since it's an iconic species, it's if they see it, they would recognize and know it was a sawfish.
Nice. Well, we have a few questions rolling in from the audience, and so wondering if we'll go to Tristan. The first question that rolled in a little while ago while you were giving your presentation, just more general questions about sawfish. Our audience is really interested to learn more about the species itself. Do they have good eyesight? They a lot of times in the Amazon, they live in murky water, but in the Bahamas, they live in pretty clear water. But how do they use eyesight to find their prey? Do they have good eyesight?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at, if I can share my screen again, that would be helpful.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you look at this photo that I had at this early in the present, I have to go all the way back through. But one thing I would say is they are probably a murky water specialist. The rostrum itself is lined with these electroreceptors, the lateral line as well. And the eyes, if you look at the size of the eyes compared to the rest of the body, they are very small. So I would say they're really not a very visual predator. And they rely on that rostrum to detect their prey. And although the waters in Andros look very clean a lot of the time, if you go to the west side of the island, most of the water is actually really silty and murky. So we also have been using side scanning sonar to be able to detect these sawfish in the creeks as well, and trying to use various different methods to find them, because the drones, although if they're on the flats and it's clear, you can see them. It's tricky when they're in those really murky conditions. So I would say they're not a very visual predator. Most sharks and rays are colorblind. They can see pretty good brightness and contrasts. They have a reflective layer of cells at the back of the eye that allows them to see in low light levels, kind of like a cat. If if you shone a torch on a cat's eye, it reflects back. That's because they have these reflective cells at the back of the eye, and these sawfish will have the same thing. But yeah, you look at the size of the eyes compared to the body, they're very small. You compare that to, let's say, a thresher shark, the eye is absolutely huge. Or another ray, for example, let's say a manta ray, the eye is much, much bigger, and they live in the coral reef and probably rely more on visual communication, in social behavior too, and courtship displays as well. So hopefully that's
Wow.
helped to
Yeah.
answer that question.
That's fantastic. Well, you mentioned the electroreception. So a lot of sharks, they have that extra sixth sense, right? That the electroreception, they use their ampullae of Lorenzini. So I guess sawfish would have those electrorecepting organs, those ampullae of Lorenzini all along its rostrum to feel the heartbeat of the animal hidden in the sand, right? Or feel muscle twitches from the.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
that's cool.
and I showed an image earlier here. So this is all the dots on the
Oh yes.
rostrum there, and you can see them close up here. So a friend of mine, a lady called Barbara Wiringer that works out in Australia, she did this really cool paper looking at the distribution of these sensory pores, the electric pores, and then also you can see the lateral line on the top as well, goes all the way down that whole rostrum. And no doubt they're really they can, yeah, it's pretty cool watching them use it. But to be honest, no one really knows that much about how they use it, particularly in the wild, because they're so difficult to find. And of course, because of them being critically endangered, and the fact that they use these murky habitats, and they truly are, I think, a murky water specialist. And they're adapted to all those conditions.
It seems like it. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Like the bull shark too.
What was that? Say again?
Like a bull shark. If you look at a bull shark,
yes,
it has very
yes.
similar eyes, very small, kind of beady eyes, just like a sawfish.
Right.
And they
Right.
love working in rivers and estuaries and things like that.
We have a few other questions rolling in. One from or two from Catalina. Hello, Catalina. Thanks for being here tonight. Patricia, you showed some images of, they were being caught and hopefully released at some point, maybe, but some rather large sawfish, right? So Catalina wants to know, how long do they live and how big can they grow?
Okay, well, we have some records of sawfish reaching over 700 kilos. I don't know that in pounds, but anyway, quite big. And size-wise, it will depend a bit on the species, the size and length. But let's take the large truth. So 700 to 800 kilos, the large adult, usually females. And in terms of length, they could reach all the way to 3 to 4, for a bit past 4 meters. They're very bulky. If you look at them laying on the sand, they're really tall, bulky animals. So, yeah, there are records, historical records of even larger specimens. But from the ones we have seen the roster, and we have got reports from fishers, that's about the range we're getting right now.
Yeah.
Usually they would be staying in deeper water, the large adults, than the babies. But
Okay.
eventually they come over to the mangroves to pup. So that's it, occasionally when they get caught, unfortunately.
So you said 400 kilograms, right? So that's almost 900 pounds. That's
Massive.
a big, that's a big animal, right? And 4 meters, 15 feet.
Yeah, I mean,
more,
there's records of, I think, green sawfish up to 20 feet long. And I know that colleagues of mine in this region have found smaller sharks have been eaten by these sawfish. So when they get to those sizes, they're actually occupying the same level in the food web as like a bull shark might.
Oh,
So
wow.
they're like an apex predator when they get to that size. I mean, you imagine how big the rostrum is.
Right. And how long does it take for them to get that age or to that size? Are they, and for the maturity level, how big are they before they can reproduce? For either one of you.
I guess it depends on, I mean, it is species specific, but with the Smalltooth, it's around 10 to 12 years before they reach maturity. And then, we know, I'm not sure whether there's been any kind of longevity studies with sawfish, but I know with other species of sharks, they can live up to 50 or 60 years of age. So I suspect some of those massive sawfish are 50 years old, even older, maybe.
That's amazing.
Yeah. We have some proxies from a study that was taken in the 70s from Lake Nicaragua with the large tooth. And that would be around 17 years old before they could mature. And age is like what Tristan mentioned, over 56 years old. It varies a bit from species to species. So here we're talking about humane species, but if you look at Australian or Asian waters, it would be a bit different, maybe.
Okay. We have more questions rolling in. We have a few more minutes, so I'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Lightning round, okay, you two? Lightning round. So so both of you are working with members of the community in the area. So the question from the audience is, do you have any thoughts towards providing rewards for the people that you're working with? Can you reward them for helping gather the research? Can you reward them for releasing the sawfish instead of capturing them and using them for other things? Is that an opportunity to expand your projects? Maybe just so a question about that. So Patricia, we'll go to you first.
Okay. Yes, you can talk to them. You can reward them. The saw can be quite expensive. It can reach thousands of dollars depending on size.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So definitely the reward will not be price balanced, but like I mentioned, we have to work with their sense of belonging and a pride. It's their value to have the animals alive for their kids. So we try to work with t-shirts, and sometimes if it's a community member more engaged, we'll help them provide some food for the month or something like that.
Tristan?
Yeah, like we have given out t-shirts and books and things like that. And interestingly, we just started a bit of an incentive program because we wanted to see whether we would get more sightings if there was an incentive. So we've just started that, and I think we're going to be doing $100 a sighting, but they have to have a video of it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, a video of the actual sawfish and say, hello, this is Tristan. I'm watching a sawfish on June the 22nd, and then send that to us. And then, so we're planning to start that up and see if that makes a difference, because a lot of these guides have said that they're seeing more than they're sending videos of. So I wonder whether there's not that motivation to do it, despite the fact that, like Patricia, you want to try and generate this pride in these animals. But, these guys have also, they've got to go out there and fish and find bonefish for their customers. So, they can't be searching for sawfish all the time for us or looking for them. So perhaps an incentive might work. And I know other people are trying things like that too. So we're going to see whether that works too. But yeah, it's a great question.
They could share the incentive with the people on the boat as like, okay, either we can fish or we can go try to make some money spotting sawfish.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So that's really interesting. Well, I think we're at time, but I just wanted to ask one more question, if you don't mind, before we go for the evening. How can people learn more? How can they stay in touch with your research? How can they get involved maybe with what you're doing? Patricia, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, well, we have Instagram. We don't post an awful lot, but we do post occasionally. We do have poachers in the region where we work, so we have to keep an eye on not to be posting exactly what's going on to avoid poachers reaching out for the animals we're trying to find. There's the Sawfish Conservation Society in the US, which they engage a lot with research and awareness. And looking up at what's news coming out from books to publish peer-reviewed papers.
Right. Staying in tune with Save Our Seas Foundation, maybe, and following
Definitely.
following yours there.
You have the blogs
Tristan,
and everything.
Yeah, and find, you know, local non-profits in the region that you're living to try and support. You know, you can potentially get involved with coastal cleanups, mangrove planting, things like that. It just depends on, you know, where you are in the world. And of course, yeah, supporting local non-profits like Saving the Blue if you're in
Get a
if,
saving the blue t-shirt right there, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we you know, and that's one of the things we do. You know, we sell apparel, t-shirts, and things like that to try and support our what we're doing as well. But yeah, you know, in you know, you know, educating your friends and colleagues as well, and pointing them in the right direction to other groups that are working with these animals. And yeah, I think that's about it, really. I mean,
Yeah.
sharks and
Well,
rays
that's
and a
great.
lot of other animals need all the help they can get.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Helping celebrating International Sawfish Day, right? I mean, I can't think of a better way to celebrate the animal. I've been talking with two experts in the field, so thank you both for being here today and helping us celebrate this special day. We really appreciate your time and your expertise and
Absolutely.
your knowledge and everything.
Pleasure being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for having us over, Lance, and talking to people that they are raised and they're critically endangered, that you should help them.
Yes, exactly. Oh, and also thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation for making this whole series possible. You can stay tuned. You can find us on YouTube as well. The whole series is on our Mods YouTube channel. You can find 2.5 years of the Distinguished Speaker series going back there. You can like and subscribe to that channel. And join us next time, November 7th, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern, to talk to another researcher all about, I should probably get rid of some boxes here. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. Talk to Cynthia Aruck from University of Tasmania. And she's studying a specific type of skate and trying to solve a mystery that's kind of associated with that one. Where is it going? What's happening with it? So you can join us then. Go to mods.org/STEM learning series or scan the QR code there and join us then. All right. With that, thank you all very much again for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thanks again. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.